Hello everyone, and welcome to the second ever video on my channel. This is It's Key here, and today we're just going to be doing part 1 of How I Build series. So for some context, a lot of people have been reaching out and asking me if I had any tutorials or any videos on how I build. So this video today would be focusing and covering on how I build interiors. And I just wanted to add a disclaimer here that this video is not a step-by-step, block-by-block how I build. What I like to do is, well, for some context, I don't plan out my builds all that much. I just roll with the flow, and I just keep adding and keep fixing things until things look right. So, so I can't say that I will be good at making a tutorial, but this video is going to be covering how I build. So for an example, certain mechanics I use, certain ideas I have in mind, I keep in mind while building. And my hope is that you, as a viewer, are able to learn some things and apply these mechanisms and mechanics in your own way of creative thinking and creative liberty. I will be rolling a couple of clips here now to show you a few interiors that I have done. And mind you, these were all done in survival. These were all from my survival forever world that you can find in my very first YouTube video on my channel as well. And for some other disclaimers, I love doing incredibly detailed things. I add stuff absolutely everywhere, and my vibe is I super enjoy having a cluttered survival home, something that feels like it has a story. I'm not a very minimalistic person. I drive on the more maximalistic side of building. And which is why I like adding all these different details, depths, and coloration. So if you do like that kind of style, feel free to stick around. And if you don't, also feel free to just leave whenever you want, because I do know that some people say that my builds are too detailed. And that's just, everyone's own opinion. So, but if you do like it, thank you guys for sticking around. For some context, this is a prop I did for a real idea that you can find on my Instagram or on my YouTube channel. But I knew that I was going to do a build interior video one day, so I just went ahead and kept it blank on top of the fact that I am slow and lazy and I don't push out content very efficiently. But let's go ahead and get started. So the first few things that I keep in mind, I always love emphasizing depth, details, and coloration, which I also mentioned in the video intro. But in terms of explaining that, if you look at this house right here, no, I don't ever try to use flat walls. I love using diagonal builds. As you can see here, I have had some practice. I've been practicing a lot recently on how to build diagonal walls and hopefully not make them look bad. I will say that I'm not perfect and I'm not a fan of these triangular, that's the word, triangular balconies. I think that balconies look better square, but that is besides the point. I love using diagonal walls. As you can see here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's do a count here. 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 4 layers right here on just one singular wall. That adds a lot of depth, and of course, if you turn on shaders, it'll look much more in depth. But even if I turn off shaders, which a lot of people also suggest for creators to do, this doesn't look bad without shaders, at least in my opinion. You can respectfully disagree, but I still don't think this looks bad without shaders. And if you look inside, people say that diagonal builds have horrible interiors, which I also respectfully disagree with. Once you start messing around, once you start experimenting, you can find the right amount of width and length of your wall that you want to keep. And I think, especially when you start adding double layered walls, which I love to do in my interiors, in which I'll get to a bit, the vibe is just completely different, and it's very subtle. Like you can look at it from distance and be like, wow, that build has a lot of silhouette or something like that, and if you look closer, it's just a diagonal wall. So I highly recommend this be the first part of how you build. So for the second part is the amount of details. As you can see here, again, I emphasize the depth and how this wall has basically four layers, right? But in terms of details, I highly, highly, highly recommend using non-full blocks. For example, like a slab, or even like this, like this grass path right here. It's not a completely full block. You can see like a bit of depth right here. But I highly recommend you use non-full blocks just to add a bit more detail or fullness to your builds. I just feel like it kind of looks naked otherwise. Like it's not the worst, but like if you go up and add it, this part of the wall doesn't look as empty, if you know what I mean. And another thing is texturing. A lot of people I know will call this block vomit, but you just kind of have to feel it out. For example, this wall right here, they're all relatively around the same color, and it just adds so much depth. And just like, I love when builds tell a story. And I think even if you didn't put much thought in here in terms of detailing the wall with texture, it will definitely tell a story. It'll be like, oh, the person here didn't have enough materials, for example, to make the wall, so this is how it turned out. And for example, if you don't believe me, I can just replace the rest of this wall with just packed mud, and it just looks like, you can like it if you think it's a cleaner feel, but in my opinion, I think this looks so much better than this wall. So that is another thing. And one final thing is, look out for the colors. Colors is huge. The colors are huge in terms of building. For me recently, I've been experimenting a lot with saturation. Previously, I used to be a one-trick spruce. I used to build everything out of just simple wood, and because it looked warm, it looked simple, I was jiving with it. But I feel like, at least for me, too many people build in strictly just brown. And that is okay if that is your preference. But for me, I've recently been experimenting with absolutely incredibly vibrant colors. If you see here, if you know anything about color, you know that orange and blue are complementary. And they just are incredibly striking when put together. And it just adds a lot of personality. But yeah, so I will suggest that before you start anything, you need to come up with a concept of what vibe you want your house to be in. So for me, I always go for cozy and maximalistic. That is my vibe. So of course I'm going to choose vibrant colors and incredibly detailed style. If you are lacking ideas of like, oh, what do I build my house in? Or like, how do I know what colors look good together? Especially when you are in a survival world, you can't just like accumulate infinite blocks and be like, oh yeah, let me try out this one, let me try out that one. I know in survival that that blocks are limited. It's going to be incredibly tiring for you to trek across an infinite world to find some biome or block, which I totally understand. Like, this is not going to be a simple process for a lot of people in their survival world. But I suggest you go to block palettes on Instagram, or like, any other website. You can probably find them. You can probably find videos about block palettes on YouTube, but you can also use Pinterest, for example, X or Twitter, Reddit. My personal favorite is Instagram, because there are like thousands of block palettes that the community comes together to figure out something. All right, so another thing to keep in mind whenever you're building is you want to have a general layout of where you want things to be. So for an example, I always build my exteriors first, because I think, that is what's on the outside. That is what people see firstly, instead of going inside. So I always build a shell first. But you should have in mind whenever you're building the shell. Oh, like you want this region to be the crafting station. You want there to be stairs, so you're going up to the second floor. You want this to be like a kitchen or something. Just keep that in mind, and also keep the size of how big you want your room in mind. Previously, I've made mistakes where I will just make a structure and then I go and I'm like, wow, I don't know what this room should be. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, I just decided to make it a kitchen of all things. And then the kitchen ends up being like 4 blocks by 4 blocks, which is insanely tiny for a kitchen. That is basically as small as a New York City apartment. So I suggest just having things in mind when you build the show. Alright, so the next thing we're gonna do for our interior is to do something called a double layered wall, which I previously mentioned a bit earlier on in the video. But for example, I want to show you guys what the difference is between this single layered wall and something that I would call a double layered wall. This is a technique that I've seen a lot of people use, and it's usually when you have like an exterior of a wall that you're like, oh, I don't want the inside of my house to look like that. So here is the blank exterior wall that I have, and this is what the inside of my house would look like after I do a double layered wall. So in accordance to the color palette I chose earlier, which I chose warped wood and also acacia log for the complementary colors, I would just go ahead and very simply just outline the inside of the wall with a different color. Just like this. And then of course we're gonna detail the windows with a non-fold block, in which case I chose warped shelves to serve as basically a window shutter or window blinds, whatever you would call these. But I think this looks super nice. And then if you go from the outside right here, if you peek in, you can see a little bit of the interior wall and a bit of the shelves, which I think is super cute in my opinion, and allows for, again, that feeling of parallax or depth. For my next step of building the interior, I did mention earlier that whenever you build the exterior of your house or the shelf of your house, or the shell, excuse me, of your house, you want a rough idea or concept of what room you want where and how big that room should be. So for an example, I have here a basically pretty naked wall. I removed the ceiling because I forgot that when I was building this exterior myself, I had no concept of the interior. So I removed the ceiling, but this is like basically a naked part of the interior. And what I went ahead and did was I went to the other side and I had a rough idea of what I wanted this room to look like. So for example, this area is supposed to be the kitchen. There's supposed to be like, all the cooking amenities over here. And then here is supposed to be the dining room area, or like where you sit whenever you eat. So in this case, our next step is to provide structural support for the room in mind. And of course, my vibe is always to have an incredibly maximalistic, compact, and cozy interior. So if you want something that's like super compact and cozy, I suggest you add separating walls. So right here, you can see, the room feels much more open. But if I add the walls here like so, it suddenly feels much more closed off and compact, which is personally how I like it. Of course, feel free to change anything to your own liking. But as you can see here, I chose spruce, which is another part of my color palette that I had for the exterior of this house, and I basically translated it inside. So I started making structural support beams right here, and for interiors, I usually like having my interior walls be 5 or 6 blocks tall. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So currently it's only 4 blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and do a time lapse of me filling out the rest of the wall right here. All right, so I'm back. And I extended the height of this wall to be 5 blocks tall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I cannot count. So of course I have to count out loud. But so the next step I'm going to do is add a ceiling. And I have a pretty convoluted process of doing this, so bear with me again. But usually I like to start off with detailing the support beams. So I know our wall is 5 blocks tall, but what you want to do is start off the beginning of your ceiling almost. Like this is where the beginning of the ceiling is going to start. It's going to start like right here. I'm going to outline this. But so that's where the upper structural support for your ceiling will be. So we're going to go ahead and do the same for the rest of these support beams. And in my opinion, I think that having a detailed ceiling is one of the most important things for the interior of your house. Like, I just think I previously was really lazy and I didn't detail the interiors of my the inside of my ceilings at all. But I think adding depth to them again just adds so much. It's just like such a, I would say like almost like eye candy, but it like does so much. And honestly, like most of the time people can't tell, like, oh wow, like this build looks so nice, but I can't tell exactly what it is that's making it look so nice. And I think that's like one of the best parts about it. Okay, so I am done with the beginning parts of the structural support. And if you remember earlier, I was talking about adding depth. So for example, right here, if you can see, there's a slab right here and then a shelf right here. So what we want to do is we want to do this thing where, okay, bear with me, this is really difficult to explain, but for example, if you have a block right here, I would, in terms of like a decimal, I would call this 1.0. It's one singular block. It's not adding or like subtracting in any regard. But if you add like a trapdoor to this thing, it's like 1.15 of a block, right? It's almost 2 blocks. It's almost like 2 blocks big. But no, it's like adding the trapdoor as like 0.15 to a block. So what we want to do here is basically make it from big to small. I mean, small to big. So we have 1.0 right here. We're going to add shelves right here to add a bit like of that kind of like curve. So we have 1.0, 1.15, and a stair is basically 3/4 of a block. So we got 1.0, 1.15, and 1.75. And I basically just use this philosophy or whatever you want to call it to like every single part of like how I detail my builds. And then, so we're going to use that same philosophy to detail the upper structure of the ceiling. So what we want to do here is add stairs. And once that is settled, we're just going to go in and do the same thing except with slabs. And sometimes you will have walls where like, oh, it's it basically, this wall is too close together, so you can't fit a slab in. And that is also okay, but just keep on continuing it for the rest of the build. Like, I know this place doesn't look super polished, but it's a start. You can kind of see it starting to form. I think I'm going to choose birch for the ceiling, right? So what we're going to do is do the same, but only for the perimeter of the ceiling that you have thus far. Alright, so what we did here was we outlined the perimeter of the ceiling, but then offset it by 1 block. So what I mean here by offset is, if you come up here and you just take away this is just a simple outline, but because I added 1 more block in, it looks offset a bit. And this further adds an emphasis on depth. So next what we want to do is we're going to live by the same philosophy that I mentioned earlier, and we're going to go from big block to smaller block. So we're just going to do that for the rest of the ceiling until it basically closes up. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to play a video of me doing this, because I feel like the more I talk, the more confused you are going to become. So just keep in mind that same philosophy that I've always been talking about, and hopefully that makes more sense. All right, so what we did here was we basically went from this offset block right here. We put stairs right here, and then we went further up and did another block right here. And this room ceiling is quite relatively small, which is why this part isn't so big. It's a got closed off over here, which is totally fine. It varies room by room. But of course, if you have a bigger room, I would suggest like, after the stairs, after you would add a slab here and then finally go up to another block to just like further enhance that feeling of depth. But aside from that, I also added some detailing on the wall, some texture on the wall. So what I basically did here was, beforehand, we used to just have straight up like acacia wall, basically log going in the vertical direction. But what I did here to add that sense of texturing was, instead of just like all walls going from like this way, I added some that would go this way, some that would go this way, some that go that way. So it kind of like, you can see the difference in the way that the wood is facing. So I did that. I added some brick, some actual wooden planks. And then of course for the log, you see here, I used that part to face outside, and that added some texture as well. But one piece of advice I give for texturing, I don't think I'm the best at texturing. Honestly, I feel like other people do gradients and textures way better than I do. So mine does kind of look like it's scrambled everywhere. But for example, all of these blocks have similar color. The brick is like basically the only outlier I'd say here, because it also has white and is kind of a different shade of red. So for blocks that are more different than the rest, I do like less of them. So you see here, I basically didn't use all that much brick, but I used a lot of the others. So this is what the finished like room structure feels like. Well, actually, I missed something right here, but yeah, so this is what the finished room structure should actually feel like. And then, so now we are going to go ahead and actually design the room. Basically, make it a kitchen and a dining area like how I always wanted it to be. Alright, so the kitchen is finally done, and before we do the total review, I want to thank every one of you guys for sticking it through this far if you are still here. On top of that, I really hope that this video was at least educational for those who are wanting to learn how to build more like me. I did introduce a few mechanics and fundamentals or concepts throughout this video that I hope that you guys can each apply to your own world and survival world. With no more further ado, here is my kitchen. I hope the time lapse was also helpful in letting you guys see how I detail the interiors like aside from the structural support. So for example, I like to translate some things from real life into Minecraft. So the very first thing here that I'm going to talk about is this wall right here. As you can see here, I switched out the wall from this acacia to a birch color. Now, I don't know about you, but in real life, I've never seen a darker colored kitchen, especially around the area where you cook. It's usually all marble, quartz, and similar, whitish beige colors. So I wanted to replicate that feeling just to match as close to real life as possible. And I added, some bright backlights on top of like this, it's some kind of ventilator. I forgot what it actually is called, but some kind of ventilator, and it takes away the grease smell and everything. Oh yeah, it's called a fume hood, like a kitchen fume hood. I don't know, but we also have cabinets right here, and also this like little area. This I think it's called an island, but this area where you can put your food and raw ingredients, translate them between the stove and here, and whenever you're done cooking, you just put them right here, and then after you're done cooking everything, you bring these plates over and then put them right here so you guys can eat. And I think this is a pretty cozy kitchen. On top of that, I do love my interior lighting. As you can see, I have a thing for building inside of mountains. And of course, the further you go in the mountains, the less natural lighting there is. So what I like to do is I like creating these slats of shroom light because shroom light emits a very cozy, warm lighting, and that fits the aesthetic I always want to go for. So there's that. I also added lanterns everywhere, and then you can see these cute little light designs that I also designed myself, but that I've also seen in real life. Usually they're around the bar area, but I decided to put them throughout the kitchen ceiling this time. On top of that, here is a jukebox. I can listen to music during eating. And then I also have little diminished campfires right here where you can just use for raw food storage, which I think is honestly pretty cute. And then aside from that, I did outline, the entrance to this room a bit because I really like the vibe of, again, compact interiors. And I don't know about you, but if you've seen these kind of older houses built in the United States, built in the 80s or 90s, they have a really cute, compact interior once you walk in. I know houses, suburban houses these days in the United States, especially on the newer end, if they're built past the 2010s, always emphasize a high ceiling. But in this case, I wanted to emphasize a closer interior. So you come in here and then you have this cute little rim around the entrance of the kitchen that newer houses don't see anymore, but older houses definitely did have. You walk in and then here is the kitchen. So I hope you like this video. And for those wondering, I will do a final showcase of this room without shaders as well. Because in my opinion, I do know that shaders do make things look obviously a lot prettier, but fundamentally, if you're good at building, or if you don't think you're so good at building, I don't think shaders will change all that much. For example, the techniques I used here were especially adding depth to the build. Those will still stay regardless of whether you are using shaders or not. So yeah, I do enjoy using shaders, and after the first time I ever put on shaders in Minecraft, I refused to take them off. But for those who really do stick close to the vanilla experience, let me show you. So here's the build without shaders. In all honesty, even if you don't enjoy the colors without the shaders, you can always switch up the colors, alright? This is the incredibly vibrant saturated walls is what I like personally, but if you're not a fan of that, go ahead and switch things up. But I still think the fundamentals and mechanics of adding depth and details still are incredibly important, even without shaders. But yeah, so that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please like and subscribe if you want to see more. Obviously, if you want another room to be built by me just so you can have another source of inspiration, or another video where you can see me apply the same few techniques and everything to a different room, I would be happy to. Just let me know down below in the comments, alright? And then make sure to follow my Instagram at itskeylu.mc. And then that is it from me. So I will see you guys next time.